Latvia to make a new resource, because this one was completely taken over and started like essentially government-related things. So it's and they did a lot of that with like essentially every bigger like internet press thingy during like 2014 to 2016-ish years. So within 2 years, there was like no independent press anymore. Essentially, even in the internet in Russia that was based in Russia, there were some resources that were actually legally based outside Russia. Because otherwise, you had no choice.
Yeah.
All right, so if anyone of you thinks that we're not operating in a legal gray zone today, when we're doing this technology, I think you shouldn't be in this room first and foremost. Give an example, right? Here in Europe, just enjoying that stuff, but maybe correctly. But the GDPR is operating now as of about a month, 2 months ago, right? What happens when I put your HIV result on the thing? Nobody can remove it. Deeply personal and private information, no right to be forgotten, because that doesn't work in the technology, right? That remains to be tested. Okay, something to keep in mind. Like this is we're in the same legal gray zone as when the Pirate Bay files went down, and when many other things have happened, right? Like Jared said, that we're maybe embarrassing government by pointing this out somehow, right? At some point, we have to think about the fact that for the people that stick out their necks, there are the consequences. Yeah.
I think it's also important to say that yes, it's a legal gray zone, but like what is morally right is a very different thing, and what is correct by the people may not be reflected in law. So I mean, just if anyone's thinking that a legally gray zone is immorally wrong, sometimes those things get conflated.
From the lyrics, the last I changed it around.
Could I just ask whoever's talking to be a little bit louder, because that's the only mic we have.
All right, I guess you jacked it up. Were you good?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So today, in this meeting, this is what we're about right now. Let's forget for a minute about maybe the DAP and the thing. Right. This meeting was largely about chat. Right, and of course we'll interface with all those other things, and we'll see later on how, for example, the organizational stuff can help us with coercion resistance and stuff like this. But this is a phrasing that I used in the job ad that we're posting somewhere. Right, we're building a messenger with extreme security, coercion resistance, and privacy in mind, and that affects you as developers. You might become targeted. It affects the organization, it might become targeted. It affects the technology that we work with. It might be used in a way that we did not anticipate. And a couple of
I think that's fine for communicating like out like in a wider audience. I would tweak the messenger thing to talk about like it's about communication, right? Like we're building like a communication tool with extreme security and coercion resistance and privacy in mind. But with communication, that is kind of like the foundation layer for like legal systems or law, which is why you can build things like money on top of it. But you can also build like institutions on top of it, which is all resides in smart contracts, and that's what the crypto tokens and Stacks network token is. So it's like this fundamental layer that we're solidifying, giving these rights to, regardless of the environment they're in, and we can build all these abstractions on top of it, and messenger being the baseline.
Very nice. What does extreme mean in this case? Like it means, it doesn't mean extreme from our point of view, because we're kind of desensitized towards this topic by just talking about it and being in this sphere, right? Extreme is compared to what anybody out there would think is normal.
Right.
Right. something to keep in discussions as well. You might come up a little bit as a weirdo, right? But
when you come up as a weirdo because the other person usually hasn't considered a lot of this. That's amazing.
And that ties back to the Pirate period, right? For me, for example, I was working under this pressure where I knew that I'm in a gray zone. You would take certain precautions not to get in trouble. The EFF was very strongly advocating for these kind of precautions. There would be like protections for developers in various spaces, things to think about when developing software, where it would avoid you getting in trouble and remaining neutral, right? From the side of the law, or remaining neutral from the moral and ethical view, or things like that. That was the argument back then, at least, that it would help you survive. So it didn't feel at all extreme that I've told this story a few times now, but our latest hire, Dustin, is joining us in 2 weeks. I knew him only by nickname until he joined us. And he was one of the biggest contributors to the software I was working on. He introduced Merkle trees of all things, which was kind of funny because it all comes back now, right? but he was like contributing code. We had very deep discussions on philosophy and technology and all kinds of things. It was just a random thing that we had, like, started contributing without any thoughts about anything else. Like, we enjoyed the special relationship we had. Based on whatever we felt was necessary for that communication to happen.
And he was applying a Merkle trees before they were cool, right? Like, he was applying Merkle trees before they were cool, like 15 years ago.
Yeah, this was 15 years ago. We were using Merkle trees to validate files. Mm-hmm. We were using a hash algorithm called Tiger, if anybody remembers it. They were called TTH, they were called Tiger tree hashes, because they form a tree and files.
Doesn't matter.
It was fun. So it's fun to see all this technology coming back again. I was studying in uni at that time, distributed systems. All right, so we have a whole agenda here. Esther has been going over it. We're going to be talking about security. This is the boring part, like stuff that you already read about. Before coming here in the agenda, you already read the compendiums, that you've already read all the books that have been posted. You've already read all these things. I don't know. This is
we're done here.
This is kind of like a waste of time, but I'm just going to eventually think somebody else will be tired when they did all that. I was so cool. There's people. We have presentations on most of these topics, and I'm very happy about all the support I've seen in Discuss, in the chat, in everywhere. Like, this is an important thing to us. So we're going to have presentation on these topics today, mostly, a bit tomorrow, so that we see the ground for further discussion, right? People, there's security teams, like how do we approach this as an organization? We're going to be talking about the principles that we have and how they tie back to the technology and the choices that we make. We have methodologies coming up, maybe, like this one called Stride, which is a framework for evaluating whether a feature is sane from a hostile environment kind of point of view. So it's kind of like a checklist that you can use as a help if you're unsure whether a feature that you're introducing takes us a step forwards or backwards on the scale of security, right? And that can serve as a help when deciding whether the trade-off is worth it. Okay? There's technologies, we're going to talk about them. DFS over there, perfect for secrecy, darkness, which is what Whisper is about. We've got our Jack protocol as well. Mesh networking, which helps solve several of these issues. Bootstrapping something like the double ratchet algorithm can be done in very many ways. One is the X3DH, the Feldman exchange, which is a beautiful mathematical construction. But it can also be done other ways, and then you can still double ratchet after that. We're going to have lots of interesting conversations on security. Coercion resistance, right? This is the other big topic, and this is a little bit about avoiding to get shut down in various different shapes and forms, right? And that can happen like because somebody takes over our cluster, which right now is easy. That can happen because
Get arrested.
we get arrested, not impossible. Like, I don't know if you've been following Ethereum, what's going on in the foundation. One of the main developers of Casper, was it? I think Yoichi.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was working on Casper.
He was doing like formal verification stuff mostly.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've heard about this guy, Yoichi. I forget the name.
On Twitter is Pira. Well, he was Pira. I don't know if you.
Under a certain interpretation of the Japanese law, he could be held responsible for the technology that he deploys to the world globally. And this gave him some, I don't know, moral or doubts at least, whether what he was doing was safe for him personally. I think so.
Yeah, he wasn't willing to accept that risk,
Yeah.
at least publicly, whether he was coerced or not.
So this is part of coercion resistance, right? It's also about like our source code. How does that survive us? How does it survive something like when I was doing this, the DMCA came about, like the hooplas around how to go around this. Like a little bit earlier, if you go back to the early crypto people, they had export laws, right? So they couldn't take crypto out of the States, even though a lot of it was developed there. So they would have creative solutions, like they would sing the source code, or they would translate the source code into notes, or they would like write it in a book, and like weird shit that got them around these strange laws, right? Distribution, like how do we get the app out to people, right? And I mentioned one example is like just peer-to-peer. Like I'm standing next to you, I give you the applications on the right? That's the mesh solution, sort of, right? In Cuba, they have this hard drive that travels the country, and again, this reminds me of what I was doing when I was like exchanging diskettes. You know, if you give somebody a blank diskette, they would give you some wares back.
Yeah.
Very cool stuff. It's the good old Pigeon RFC, if anybody's read it. Yeah? Okay. You know what I'm talking about. Coercion resistance, yeah, obviously it's about censorship as well, like great firewalls. Countries that have control of all the peers around you, and you can do things to you, right? Through that.
Actually, you mentioned DAppNode there, by the way. They had a launching article out, and we're not in DAppNode.
I know. I talked to them, and I met them in Cardona, and we sort of have a communication later.
Yeah.
Fix that.
Okay.
It's just, you know.
On the list.
Long list.
Yeah.
Very nice guys, by the way.
Oh, super cool.
They're the ones that are being affected today by these things, like somebody mentioned. I think it was you, right? Jordi, which heads which is part of the Gibet team and the DAppNode. I think. He just left Barcelona, fearful of being oppressed politically for his engagement in the separatist movement there. I think he's here in Switzerland.
He's somewhere.
I don't remember the dish.
No, you're broadcasting.
Now I'm not privacy. This one is a little bit more soft mushy. It's hard to talk about privacy. I mentioned a few examples, right? And what comes in here when we talk about privacy is this normalcy feeling that you connect with everything. And it's not really about hiding stuff. It's about choosing, right? It's about choosing what you share. Not hiding it. You just like you choose what you share with others. Not that weird. You do that all the time, every day in your life, right? Should you call somebody on the phone precisely because you don't want to post it in a blog post? Right? That's privacy. Very simple, right? Nothing. But when you talk about it, it's like, oh, I'm going to make these technologies that are going to keep me perfectly safe, and I'm going to be like sitting in my bunker and waiting for the world
It's like having curtains on your house when it's facing the street, you know, on windows. Sometimes you like to have those closed at night.
So I don't know. That's something for marketing and promotion, right? This is normal. It's not weird. Even though the technology is involved, they sound very aggressive, right? But think about what the real world looks like. It's not that aggressive.
Oh. It's assertive.
Yeah.
That's all.
Moderation, curation, there are total registries. I don't know if we'll touch on these. Metadata leaks. This is going to be interesting.
Well, I find this really interesting because of the mixed panel discussion, right? Basically, the attempt to find other alternate sources of analytics is essentially based on our metadata leaks, right? So it's kind of a really interesting way to do that, because as we start analyzing this data, we're also becoming more aware of how we're being leaky. And then maybe, hopefully, we choose to find ways to minimize that. Please.
Yeah, we had a long conversation about this with Happy in the middle of the night, and then, yeah, there is a thing, and at some point I think I said that every single thing that we find that we can use against, like, to measure usage is a failure.
Yeah.
I was in the heated part of the discussion. We eventually came to it.
No, but I mean, if you want to measure like the system in general, it doesn't mean that you might measure it in a way that doesn't give you any exposure of this part. So if you want to make sure that our like chat system as a system is healthy, you don't need to like sacrifice privacy of each user. It's like you might know in general what's going on, but you might not know who exactly does what, right?
That's what you hope for. That's not always what happens with the deployment of technology, which is extremely advanced and hard to do correctly.
Yeah.
Against an adversary that is much more powerful than you. There's this asymmetry of power, right?
And I just want to add, like, I mean, having these kinds of constraints doesn't mean you can't achieve similar goals. It's just that you have to think laterally, get more creative. And that's actually where all the fun is. It's like, okay, given these constraints, how do we design these?
So actually, what our discussion did end up heading towards was finding like creative ways of solving this problem, and maybe rephrasing it a little. So maybe it's not exactly the BAU number that we need, but we need an indication of what works and doesn't. And by liberating the problem this way, we can think about it in new ways and find alternate solutions.
Yeah, like switching around what we want to disprove for success.
Yeah. Something like this, right? Cool. Yeah, so metadata, this is a tough pitch. This one is really hard. This is going to be where a lot of our compromises will be.
Yeah, and I mean, also like you mentioned, it's like it doesn't mean that it has to be 100% all the time. As long I'm kind of, at least maybe this is personal opinion, but I'm kind of comfortable if we're educating the user and they voluntarily do these things to a certain extent, but like guaranteeing that they're well educated and they're guaranteeing that they absolutely know that, like, say, opting into tracking, for example, they don't really understand what that means, right? But if you can break, it's a topic discussion, so I won't go into it, but, you know, being voluntary is just a thought.
And this ties back to an information asymmetry between us and the user. We cannot expect the user to know all these things. And sometimes we have to make like a good choice, such that we don't become the last ones in the room when it matters. Right? I'm going to post my last slide. No, not even that.
Who's still on Facebook here? I'm just kind of curious. Yeah.
I mean, registered or using. That's the deal.
If you're registered, it's already.
It's too late.
Right.
Your real name or not? You can have it.
Yeah. Well, they started banning everybody who didn't have real names. So.
With 3D reviews fake name, but I've never been known.
Oh, really?
That's good.
Thanks, Jessica.
Right.
I actually noticed there's an electronics store 150 meters from here. So I'll go and try and find their microphone.
Oh, right. Yeah, maybe. I can go at lunch and try and find something. The other option is we just move a little bit closer. From what, I mean, yeah.
If we can find a cheap like condensator mic that actually takes very good distances. Is there a two-type
Okay.
mic?
Yeah.
Then that, yeah, let's do that. So we'll go at lunch. I'll go at lunch and I'll try and find a good mic.
Yeah, because usually we can buy something for really cheap. And
It's really right around the corner.
Yeah.
So if you know what we should get.
yeah,
It's a digital.
Okay, cool. I'll head over at lunch.
Yeah.
Cool. So then,
Cool.
Oscar,
So,
what can you share with us?
all right. So this is not really a speech, but it's more of an anecdote. Might be some people, and I thought we could do like a short sort of collaborative brainstorming thing, which might be useful. So a lot of people recently started working at Status. I guess 6 or so months ago, we had this thing where our Slack was open, and we had a lot of sort of phishing attempts. So people were pretending to be Carl or Jared, and they sent like a message saying like, oh, send SNT to this address, and then you get some freebies and stuff. And this was like untenable, like it was a huge problem, and Slack was completely unusable. And people lost real money. Like I saw someone lost like 10 grand or something like this. So it wasn't trivial.
Yeah, I mean, that phishing account, there was multiple states where they got like 100 grand every time they did it, right?
Yeah. So it was a big problem, and we were trying to find ways to solve it. And what we ended up happening is that we moved to Riot. And the reason for moving to Riot is because then you could do this thing with links where you could control the links. You need permission to post certain types of links. So you couldn't post like a fake version of EtherScan, like EtherWallet or whatever.
It had moderation tools.
Yeah, moderation tools, exactly. And I guess that's sort of like an isolated thing, but it touches on some things that are interesting, like it touches on the fact that you need identity solutions because it's easy to spoof that you're someone, and moderation tools and these things. But I also think one more sort of general lesson in terms of sort of past and where we want to go and so on is we had this problem, and then the way we chose to solve it was to sort of move to Riot, but it was sort of done in this way where now we're still using Slack, right? And it's not like the Riot community is super active. So I think, generally speaking, historically, we have done security decisions in a kind of haphazardly way. And I think that's something we want to change. And it's a question of like, how do you go about it? And one approach of this is just coming to some kind of shared agreement on what's sort of currently broken, right? And I think it's been floated a few times, and I started writing it myself, but I thought we could do it together, which is a kind of wall of shame, if you will, where essentially we list things that we think are currently broken, and it can be anything, no specific sort of constraints around it, but just a brainstorm around it. And I was thinking we could just very roughly off the top of your head sort of categorize it from, this is like a complete blocker. So if you might scale from 1 to 5, where 1 is like, this is a complete blocker, we should pull that from the App Store. And 5 is like, this is okay, we don't have to solve this within the next 2 years or something like that. And I think it would just be interesting to get everyone in this room on the same page, because it gives us at least some direction that's more structured in terms of attacking sort of the biggest problems. And I think it will also maybe seed the discussions over the next coming days. So I don't know what you guys think, but my idea was we can just have a HackMD sort of session. I'll share a link, and then we can have like maybe 5 minutes where everyone just writes things, 5-10 minutes, people just write things that they think are currently broken. And then we can have sort of a voting stage after that where people just put like a number, and then we get some shared sort of brain in this room. What are people's thoughts on that?
Sounds good. Just a question, how does it connect to the items list in the risk matrix? So can you give an example, what would you work on?
Well, I think we can see, right, because it will be a shared thing, but it might be something like we don't support PFS, we are running Infura, we are currently still using Slack, we are one legal entity, like it could be anything like that.
Encryption, WP is for.
Yeah, like anything, like just know this is like the sort of divergent theme, like everyone just everything you can think of.
So the wall of shame.
Yeah, wall of shame.
Yeah,
How can people expose? Live
but
stream from YouTube.
that's exactly what Stride that Jacek was talking about is about, but it also gives you points on what you want to check. That's kind of help brainstorming. But should we just go through? Because Stride is actually is the checklist, like it's spoofing, tampering, like privilege.
So I think we can do that too. I think this is a matter of sort of seeding the conversation, and we can do another session, and maybe there will probably be more. That's
Yeah, I mean we can do it now, and we can do it later. I think slightly more for.
I think it's better to do it later when we've all had at least a taste of these security methods and so on, so that we can do it with some.
It just gives a little bit more view, because then you kind of draw. Okay, we have that, and that, and we have these parameters of it, and then it's a bit easier to think about what could go wrong. So it gives a bigger picture.
To me, this is just a matter of sort of seeding. Because people come from different backgrounds and so on, and it's like a methodology.
Yeah, we can do it.
This is stuff.
Now and then we can evaluate it on the
Yeah, exactly. That would be
If we
one.
just have one person writing, we can just start yelling out things.
Sure, we can do it. So I can.
Sorry, let me send this link in Slack. This is the whole massive stuff.
In general, I like that. They did something similar for the code in general. So what's the wall of shame of our code base? And that's really help to improve the.
I sent in the other thing. If you go to events bus.
Well, somebody's popular. Alternatively, somebody's ignoring everyone.
Just go down.
Is Rachel on the
She's coming here at 1.
Oh.
Yes.
So there you have a perfect example of a metadata leak.
Yeah. All right. I can type if people want to jump in as well. So just throw things at me.
Where's the line?
Sorry?
Where's the line?
It's an event that's special, but you can also just shout things out. We can just do this for maybe 10 minutes.
Very easy to impersonate people. Identity control.
Yeah, we store the seed phrase in our database. We remove it later, but yeah, it's still there. And we don't include additional functions.
So there's generally a lack of knowledge of the security feature of the app. So I just found out, which I didn't know, and it's not very well documented there. We do store backups for both Android and iOS, and I wasn't aware of that. And that means that basically we have unencrypted backups for people who had unencrypted version of the database before, which causes problems.
Okay.
Depend on
Yes.
Single entity.
We inject Web3 everywhere without thinking that, if you load any web page that uses Web3 in a malicious way, you can just do that in our app. We don't whitelist it, so we don't ask permission. And we also have weak certificate checks in our code. We don't use certificate pinning. We don't use any nowadays reasonable technique of dealing with certificates in our application. We just check that they are there, but we don't really check that they were tampered with.
Certificates for what, sorry?
Like if we download something via HTTPS, for instance,
Right.
we don't do like proper certificate checks. And the same if you browse something in the browser, we don't have the real like information on certificates or some verified certificates versus unverified in our in-app browser. There are two different things.
No public full secrecy.
No plausible deniability as well. No plausible deniability as well.
Probably it can be easily DOS
Yeah.
by a lot of Whisper packages.
And the cluster is all, like we run the cluster, so essentially like, you don't have, if
Yeah.
status go tomorrow, it's a single point.
Serverless with servers.
I'm not sure our mail servers encrypt anything. So probably, I don't know, the database is probably unencrypted on mail servers. So.
The payload is encrypted. What metadata is attached to those?
Yeah, metadata is.
Get P2P encryptions. Not. Is it?
Well, as long as you don't rely on it. It's still not.
Mail servers are a bit of,
Sorry?
the mail servers are a bit of a single point. It's very easy to have a cat. Also, you can, and then point is that you can probe the user, you can send him some certain messages, and you can see the data coming through automatically. So that's something essentially you can, yeah.
Andrea, what did you mean by no plausible deniability?
So like secure application, like essentially like what they do, like they make sure that the message you send, you can deny and send that message. So the person that you're talking to is 100% sure that that message is coming from you, or 100% sure.
Single password for everything.
But if you
Without
show it to a third
being able
party,
to change.
they won't be able to prove that he hasn't
So
faked
if you
that
lose
message.
it. And do we have
And that
any
works.
any
in the
like
right
max amount
system.
that you can send
Yes,
in our wallet?
possibly
If you
enough
don't,
to
then
say,
also-
not because you need proof.
So we shouldn't
not
allow
acceptable
to
because
send
it would have been an easy defect.
Right now, I guess we do have a limit, so if I want to send like a million ETH somewhere through our wallet. Yes, it's possible.
Most of for more people. Anything you think of?
It's about the key that we are using. We are, like, for example, when you browse the apps, you're using the same account for everyone, right? So
Yeah, there's no DAP account privacy.
Yeah, and the same for chats. So also same story.
I mean, it's kind of why we have multiple, we used to, I don't know if we still have, but like multiple users, right? So there's like and that's actually it's a classic example of a convenience versus privacy trade-off.
Yeah.
It's like, do you want to have like, as a user, is it okay to log in as a user, and then if you want to be a different person, you just create a new account? I don't know if you want to have that one user, and then I mean you can have multiple wallets under it, but there's a logical distinction there.
Yeah, I'd say that we also have an only single factor of protecting things. We don't have any second factor of authenticating transactions, for instance, authorizing transactions. I don't know if it's possible to do a second factor in blockchain.
What do you mean second factor in?
Like usually, I mean, you might protect something by something you know, something you have, and something. Yeah, and essentially, it's usually for financial stuff. You need to prove two of these differently. So it should be like something you know, like your password, plus something you have, like a mobile phone with Google Authenticator or something on it. So it's like combining these two is the second. So that's called the second factor authentication. So it's one just having a password is not enough to steal all your data or all your money. I'm not sure how it works with blockchain in general, but there are like multi-sig stuff, so where you can spend.
Sure, yeah. This,
But it can be the hardware wallet, it's something you have, it's the wallet, and
Yeah.
something you know, it's the PIN code of the wallet.
Yeah, something like this, but
Let's keep brainstorming. I think we can dive into different specifics.
I'm not sure which changed since I did it, but the deployment of the app on the App Store, I think it's
Distribution.
like when you read the Coercion resistance article that JSEC shared, we are very, very, very far from being
That
Coercion.
was very positive.
yeah, that's true though. Yeah.
well, the same for Google Play, because they can even remove the application from your phone later if you are distributed from Google Play.
Is that deployment the same as like end-to-end deterministic builds and multi-signature binaries?
Yeah, there is this, and yeah, and also, I mean, to for instance, you publish every week something saying that you're not being coerced, and then if you stop doing it, then people know it's that kind of thing. So they can force you to not. Yeah. Yeah, and also, yeah, the multi-sig is very important, I guess, like that multiple persons have access, but they need to agree on doing actions. But I think it's probably pretty hard with the Apple Store, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably true. But I mean, we can do another ones, right? You can do multi-sigs on APKs, for example. And you could probably do it on, because it's APK, you could also have it done that for you.
I can tell a little bit of a story about a buddy of mine. He's working on BISC, which is a decentralized exchange for Bitcoin predominantly, but they can use it for Ether as well, right? And in their organization, they basically decentralize everything. And one of the ways to do that is simply that all posted code is done anonymously as a solidarity statement, kind of, right? So that you cannot single out any single developer as the author of any particular piece of code. So, like, you can take this pretty far if you want to. If you want to. Like, it becomes onerous at some point, right? But at the same time.
Oddly, it's the complete opposite of what we do right now, because we sign our code individually.
Yeah, but it's something to think about, like the mere idea of it, right? That there are different ways to approach it, right? And this is an extreme one, where the identity of whoever is posting the code and doing the signing, for example, might be unknown other than it's a particular one, and then people can choose to trust that or not, or they can just go and build it themselves.
Yeah, I'd say signing the commits, if that's what we're talking about, is only really a concern just because we're on GitHub and then we're identifying through GitHub data as well. Like there's a link there. Whereas if you're completely anonymous and signing, like or pseudo-anonymous and signing, that's substantially a lot better.
But the anonymously committing will actually be pretty interesting because it would change the way we do the pull request, like not knowing if it's someone from status quo or a complete stranger, because I assume that like we have a bias towards people who are not from the organization, so that if we do that, then we have to pay more attention to every commit. So it could be
exactly.
Eventually, we would be able. I mean, probably you would be able to sell my commit. I would be able to sell your commit, Jan's commit.
Yeah.
You know, like once we know each other, like this style of very that'd be interesting.
We could enforce code styling rules.
You can have code mixers where you take 10 pull requests and split them.
Yes.
We can look a lot of draw logs.
Who cares about the operations anyway?
So we can leak a lot of metadata draw logs and sometimes data.
I love the conversation. I think this was a great idea. I would want to break the thread now. I think this is like more than enough for 2 weeks. No, and we have some outstanding issues described already. So what we can do is add this list, merge it with the existing list, and then the coming days give them a unique number. So we can discuss them all together.
And dedupe and categorize it.
Yeah.
How's everyone feeling in terms of hunger and lunchtime? I think we have some time for Adam to present before we.
Yeah, I have some stuff about the audit and audit program. So I mean, it's gonna be like 10 minutes. So I don't know after you.
Do you wanna take the screen?
Sorry, can I do something? I guess do people, because I think one thing that we use, maybe it's something we can do later during the session, but what I also want to get at is in terms of categorizing things and things that we want to block on now, like we shouldn't do in product development until this is fixed kind of thing, versus things that, okay, we can solve this in 3 years. Because right now I think it's kind of this, generally ideal, well, we want to have this, but I feel like that's kind of lacking. I was hoping we could do some kind of voting or some kind of at least getting a feel for how people think about these things. Like mixed plan is a great example. Some people like when say like, oh, we shouldn't do this with it, we should remove it now. And other people say like, oh, well, we can find another solution and maybe in 2 years time, whatever. There's like two extremes in a way, right? So I think having some consensus or at least making this divergence more evident would be useful. Because I think everyone here has sort of different ideas in their mind, and obviously we can't put like blocking on all of these, but I don't know, do people want to do that later, at a later stage, or?
I would suggest that if we merge the list and we have all of them, that we find some space to like print them out and do some prioritization before we.
And also I think it's more, especially for mixed panel, it's more fair to wait for people who might defend it a bit. Because
Before we do it now.
I think
I
think it's
product management is not
Should we plan that maybe tomorrow or something?
We can do it this afternoon.
This course doesn't have any voting mechanism.
No,
That would be nice to just create each one of these as a posts and people could
we can use
comment.
paper as anti-token.
Yeah. So we have some more presentations to get everybody on the same page. The first time allocated to actually dive into topics was this afternoon, so we can take half an hour at the start of that to see what are the topics we want to focus on these days.
Just back on that list, I just wanted to say that like we should be very open and transparent about a lot of these things, and like we shouldn't have this sort of like I've noticed that some people in the organization they want to try and hide these things, and I think that's really disingenuous, and it certainly works against our users, and we should be very open about it.
Yeah, that's why I was saying, putting this in discuss so even the community can vote as well on what they feel we should address first. But yeah, that's the typical, coming from corporate scenarios, that's the typical reaction.
There's another one where some of our blog posts have been optimistic about our features.
And
what we support. Very optimistic.
Yeah.
That one I'm wrong with saying that. That's not politically correct.
That's true. That's true.
But the more marketing you do, the more optimistic you become. So.
But it's like the technical review of posts we put out will cover as well.
What's your suggestion to
technical accuracy of marketing
and vote for us?
I mean, all the stuff.
Coming days. So to post it now so people can vote.
At latest by the end of the day we should have something so we can use it as input, hopefully use as input for the.
Maybe what we can do is like highlight a number of topics and then have some like wild cards, because I think it'll be hard to get people not here to vote by this afternoon, but maybe we can keep like 3 open slots or whatever, and add some of the things that maybe are.
But then the question is, what do we do with those if we do like threat modeling for real? And then it will probably uncover more stuff. So what we'll do with that, if we vote like right now on this list, and then we'll get a better list with more stuff. So should we have this list as a starting point so we can think about it internally right now, and then we'll do like a more proper strat or something, more proper threat modeling. It probably will extend with something, and then that extended list that we actually did, we might share and then get external votes on, and it also gives more time with the.
Yeah, it's just a seed, right? And you evolve it from there, and it will be more granular.
It very well shows that everyone is concerned about the same things.
So then you would say we keep this list for us to vote for the coming 3 days. We do the threat modeling to see if we can extend it, And that list we post publicly to see what other topics might get
Right,
more
so
votes.
I thought you were asking generally for the rest of the, not about this particular topic, but generally. Yeah, for this topic, that's fine.
Yeah.
I was thinking more, you know, getting to the end of the day and then creating already the threads and discuss for these topics, so people can also expand on it.
At the end of the day, after the threat modeling, or this.
In the recap, so
Yeah.
we could take, you know, 10, 20 minutes to create the threads, discuss.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Maybe we'll get something interesting.
yeah. I was surprised in the perfect forward secrecy that Andreas was discussing. There was this guy, John Bostic. It was it was great to see people, you know, who I don't know, interact with us like that. So hopefully we'll have some more input.
Yeah, it's really awesome that like we're starting to get the just by having that discuss, we now getting contributions from the community again,
Yeah.
which we've been so close to for so long. It's amazing to see that people are still out there.
One point on the agenda. Since we want to buy mic in a lunchtime, maybe we should do lunch a bit earlier so more presentations we have.
With the mic.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to break for lunch now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can break now or after.
Add on to after lunch
So
with a good
after-
microphone.
If we break now, we can record your session.
Yeah, no problem.
Do people want lunch already because we just started? I thought we just go. I would just go. I mean,
Let's
it's
I mean, the
we're
audio
only
is
been
audio
like
for
2
us
hours.
is fine, just
Oh, okay.
presenting. I think
Ah, yeah, then
we have, our audio is okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Oh, yeah, fine.
Then,
Yeah. Okay, I sent you a link to slides on Google.
Did you send it on Slack?
Directly to you. Oh, I'm not sure the converting, but we'll see.
Sorry. I'm just gonna say one thing about lunch is that they tend to close around 2 here.
Oh, good
really?
point.
I don't think it's 10 minutes.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Yeah, I just like it's not 10 minutes. That means maybe. Yeah, so just maybe I wanted to talk a little bit about the audit that already happened 2 months ago, I believe, and that we have already booked a new engagement with the same company, and we pretty much would like to review the things that were added after the previous audit. We also have this bug bounty program. That was also kind of interesting when we were trying to publish this on Medium. That was kind of also interesting start from our point of view, like censorship and these kind of things. I'll mention it later. So yeah, so as you probably know, we cooperate with Deja Vu Security. They are from Canada, I guess, or Seattle. Yeah, and yeah, the cooperation with them is pretty good. So they are pretty responsive. They are handling stuff pretty well. And the first engagement that's pretty successful. They found a few really major stuff. And the whole engagement was kind of professional from their side. So that was a good experience. That's why we decided to follow up and sign up for the next engagement. However, this whole process is a bit lengthy and kind of not really fitting our needs as we are developing pretty rapidly and changing, adding features every week, improving stuff, and the whole process they work and kind of the whole engagement is built kind of waterfall principles. So what happens is that pretty much we collect scope first, and it happens 1.5 months or 2 months before the audit starts. So this is already 2 months period where there should be no new things that they are gonna audit it. So that's already when they finish the audit, it's already 2 months of work that we could deliver new stuff, and they probably are not audited or they are just just audit it, but just take a little bit, not really deeply check. So the whole model does not really work and does not really suit our needs. So like I said, this first is scoping, so pretty much talking to them and presenting them all the modules. They are actually looking into code. It's not like they're just grabbing the app and clicking around, but they are looking into the code. So we are providing like pretty much Git tags with reference to the point of time that the code that should be audited. And they are doing that for both status code and status repositories. And yeah, so this is like a first phase. We are providing the scope, and then there's some time when we negotiate the final timeline when they actually start working on that. And yeah,
you say status React. Are they auditing the Coercion stuff as well?
Really? Yeah, the code. Yeah, they are looking into the code. Yeah, yeah. So that's why they are requiring us to provide like specific Git tag, so that the code is would they analyze this in this phase before they start auditing. They don't really want to this code to be changed and move forward. So that's why they kind of require specific tag, specific version.
They don't audit our dependencies though, right?
Yeah, that's right. They are a bit auditing that. So for example, they checked probably maybe it's probably, but they checked the jail implementation of the JavaScript core that we use. So they audited that if they can exploit it. But they did it only on like some kind of popular attacks. They don't really try to use like more advanced stuff like buffer overflowing or something like that. They did not explore this, but they checked it from like some basic stuff.
And not React Native, but they look at, for example, the RunDB. They look at RunDB, but they look at the memory side.
Yeah, they were also doing it, or they were like they looked at the Realm database that we use on Status React side. So they did that, but yeah, it's not like they checked every dependency. That's right.
Yeah, dependencies, there are lists already. Typically the JavaScript dependencies, they are being checked by OWASP community, so you can have like safe OWASP list of dependencies. I know that React Native, for instance, fails this. There are like 5 or 6 dependencies that doesn't pass the OWASP security list. So it's just a question of essentially taking the OWASP list of known vulnerabilities in our dependencies and just applying it. So they don't need to be specifically audited for that, because there are lots of people in Node community that already do that. Unless we use something super weird.
Yeah, the Node community is probably the worst group of people to offer security.
I could very easily call that a bullshit argument, right? Because and I'll give an example from last week, which is the battery consumption, right? It's something that's remotely exploitable, I suppose. And we upgraded, nobody noticed it, and then like a little bit later, suddenly there's like, oh wow, some long messages saying it's spike on the battery. And there are millions of these things when you open up the field, right? But on the other hand, yeah, there's reality as well. We can stop talking now real vision onto.
Yeah, but it's kind of implausible that you check like 1.5 gigs of source code of dependencies, right?
Yeah, that maybe tells you something about
that we
how
don't
to approach the problem as well.
Yeah, of course.
Like maybe that is 1.5 gigs of source code that we let out in there and we let people financially transact through that. I mean, is that really the same?
But yeah, that might boil down to is JavaScript development nowadays sane in general?
But that's not an argument, though, right?
Yeah.
Do you know if this company does something like threat modeling, or can they use issues that?
I don't know. We could ask them about it, because yeah, we should ask them.
So what was the question?
If this company also does threat modeling, or if they can use the algorithm that we just created.
Yeah, but I think they should do it, because in the final report from the first engagement, they actually not only put like the technical issues, but also some kind of issues related from like the user perspective. So for example, they noticed that it's not possible to clear your chat history. That was what they actually noticed and brought us to us. So they are also looking from that perspective a bit, maybe not kind of additional thing, but they do that.
So the Mist guys, they use another company that focuses on browser security threats, and they analyze it from sort of the UX perspective and that sort of thing. So they try and break the experience. I'm a little scared to get into that yet at the moment, because there's probably a whole bunch of holes, and we should probably think about that before we engage a company like that.
It doesn't seem like we already noticed so many issues that like an external company might not.
You mentioned
Yeah, it's wasting their time.
around the
Really.
database.
And there's no guarantees from me
That they looked into this, but regarding the fact that it wasn't encrypted, they didn't.
They did it. Yeah, they put it into the report. So regarding this phase when they actually start working on that, there's like a kind of initial phase where they are looking at the code and maybe run some general checkups. So like, for example, they're trying to see if the app is doing some network traffic when you do not use it, or like some suspicious networks, some ports open and so on. So like kind of basic stuff. They're trying to look into the files. So for example, during this initial phase where they are like doing this general checkups, they noticed that our application saves some files that are unencrypted, and they just found that inside this unencrypted files there are like sensitive information like passphrase or other things, or chat history that is unencrypted. And later is like main audit, I would call it. So we were having like weekly or even more often calls with the engineers, and we were talking about the things that are doing and the things that they found, or providing some more information if they need it. So something like that. It's not like they are somewhere and they're not accessible and they're like working for 2 weeks and then just provide us some document, but this process kind of like they're in constant communication with us, so that's pretty good. And they're good from engineering perspective on this. So they are also trying to understand the code. So for example, the guy Dan, who was previously involved, he was actually asking questions about the specific parts of the code. So you could see that they are actually doing this on even the code level. So that's good. And in the end, they are kind of taking everything what they found into a single document, which is quite cool because it's going to be published to the community. And it's also really got a good summary for us, like about everything what they found and all the details about it. They also include some recommendations. So maybe, like I mentioned, this thing with chat history and other things. These recommendations are not necessarily issues that affect the applications now, but they are like good things that we should consider in the future, how we can improve the app from different points of view. So like from user experience or from like the user point of view, for example, they mentioned also deleting account and wiping out all the data. It's not possible right now easily. So yeah, this kind of things.
So what concerns me here is I'm getting the impression that the scope is quite large in terms of like auditing the application. And the final, like the auditing period was 3 weeks.
Yeah, the first thing was pretty large because they were pretty much auditing the whole application.
But yeah, it was limited scope still. It was around
it was limited.
Transaction side.
So to put this in perspective, or at least the context that I'm viewing it from, the status network token, we engaged roughly about 4 or 5 different security or similar firms to do the auditing. And the code base is arguably a lot smaller. I mean, of course, it's deployable and it's immutable, but they all wanted at least like a minimum of a month of auditing.
Yeah, so that's here. It's like pretty much we are pointing them into the specific modules, so they are not really following all the code bases. That wouldn't be possible. Okay. So for example, for the new engagement, we would like to focus on end-to-end encryption, so that we put them like a link to the module that implements the protocol itself, right? It's still quite a lot of code, so we didn't really get a final response from them yet. I'm gonna ping this guy this week to finalize this, but yeah, It's more about the module level rather than the whole topic.
And I think that's also disingenuous from a communication standpoint. Then, we basically said we had this audit and it's for the beta. But really, I mean, come on, guys. Like, it's an audit of a very specific things, and we should be saying that.
Yeah. So in this report, actually, there's like point by point mentions what they actually did, right? So it's not, it's true. We shouldn't say like the co-op was audited, but these specific areas were audited and checked. Yeah. And the same thing happens for the second engagement that we are gonna have. This is like, I mentioned.
Do people want to hear what the scope is, or is it not interesting?
I have a like.
Just generally what I was looking in.
Yeah, along those lines, I was wondering if there's any overlap compared to what we just experienced on actually. Like if there's anything that they had out of that we have come up with ourselves.
I think so. Yeah. So a few things. Yeah, there are overlap, but also in the previous engagement, we were also like finding some issues that they hadn't found. So that was also kind of interesting.
Is the main reason for us to hire Deja Vu to have an external party so that we can communicate with the audited by a third party, or is it also to like really uncover things that we may miss?
I believe that it's the latter thing first, and the second, and then the first thing that you mentioned also important to not also audit the code by ourselves, but have someone external to look into that. But like what was the main reason?
I mean, the reality is that right now we don't have enough security expertise, right? So that's sort of the thing we could do, which would at least give us some experts looking at, right? But it's nowhere near enough. Like ideally, you want to have multiple security firms. You want to have dedicated sort of experts, and we're working on hiring that. And also just generally what we do now, we're getting more people to think about this and creating culture and security champions and so on. So it's like a several front attack, but this was just the best we could do, given that we want to release a beta and we want to have at least some assurances around core things like transaction signing, so people don't lose funds. But it's just a start.
But in general, like we are in the finance world, so I did the PCI DSS compliance in my previous place. You are actually required, like at least once a year, to have an external company to audit your code, and because these are two different things. One thing from your internal, but it's a basic like hygiene that you also have like once or twice a year an audit from some external people, because they tend to find totally different issues and things like this. So we need to have both, even when people have a lot of expertise inside the company.
Yes,
yeah. And also we put really like emphasized in the first engagement that really important for us the key management, the signing transactions, this kind of stuff. So they really looked into that first, and later they started looking into other things like this jailing thing and other stuff that were not as much important, because the first engagement was also time box, so that's important. They were not doing that for 3 weeks and claiming that they audited everything. They just we time boxed them for 3 weeks and they audited what they could. So that has like a couple of drawbacks and positive stuff. So I got the impression that the quality of their work is really good. They do like this professionally and found some issues that were really important. So that's good. This final report is a really nice thing. It's good that they are like explicit what they actually audited. So that's also important. But it also has like a lot of drawbacks. So the first thing is waterfall approach. For us, it's not really cool because we're rapidly changing stuff. And as I mentioned, there's like 2 months of that, and we pretty much need to freeze what they're gonna audit in 2 months in advance. So that's not really ideal for us. For 2 months, we are doing a lot of stuff. So the code that they are looking into is already a bit outdated. Changing the scope is hard, so we did it during the first engagement. But that involved like rescoping, another week for them to analyze the new scope, and extended the audit by a week or 2 to actually audit the changes. So And yeah, so that was not really, it's not really efficient to extend the scope working in this environment. And the most important is not, they are not really helpful on a daily basis. So during the audit, we of course can, we have the calls with them, so we can ask various stuff and they are happy to answer them. But yeah, on helpful, they are not really helpful on a daily basis. So whenever a team is working on some feature and like to get some insight from the expert, it's not really possible. So we still, that's why we're having this security, senior security engineer position open. We are still trying to find someone that could lead this effort and be helpful for the teams on daily basis.
So you reach out to Corey, by the way?
Are they not helpful because they're unavailable or because we didn't?
They are not available. Yeah. So as I said, we have this calls like with them at least weekly, but usually it's more often, like every 2 days. And they're kind of stand up, so they are informing us what they are working on right now, and what they are going to work on next day, and we can ask them some questions about security, and they are happy to answer. But you know, when the audit ends, it just, you know, it's not possible because they have other things and they are not really.
You don't really engage auditing companies on that sort of frequency basis. It's kind of like, okay, we now have code freeze, and this is our thing.
Yeah.
Check it. You know.
And that's
but in this particular case, there was a very large push to get to this quote beta, and so like we started this probably a little prematurely.
Yeah. So yeah, this is this engagement, second engagement to plan with Deja Vu, and it's planned for September. Still waiting for the final timeline from Andrew from Deja Vu. We would like to finish this before the end of September, definitely, because there we have some days to apply some fixes and prepare a release for that one. So that's the main point here. And 2 main areas that we would like to audit is the end-to-end encryption of messaging protocol and wallet refactoring. So this is all this ERC, so tokens, ERC20, and also these collectibles that were added. Usage of the third-party APIs. They are also checking the integrity of use. So this is like, is it possible by a malicious user to change the view in some way? So the user is not tricked by injecting some data, phishing stuff. So yeah, that's the 2 main areas, but there are a couple of smaller that we also presented them.
There seems to be a lot of pressure to change the encryption.
Yeah, so we have to rush.
More advanced feature. Why are we doing that stuff?
Yeah, this is another thing actually. Yeah. We think about bug bounty program. So as I heard, we had already one write-up, but when we were asking about some successful stories, there were not really any, which is good, I guess.
Actually, that was kind of interesting, right? Because the bug bounties that we did have come in were essentially it ended up being like used against us in like a few instances.
I've seen the issue.
Which is kind of interesting. And there was like some people that were trying to hold the reputation of status against them for seemingly benign things, which is really interesting to watch.
Yeah, but we decided to kind of extend it for the app itself, and we tried to post it on Medium, but their censorship prevented us from doing it. So pretty much they blocked our post whenever we wanted to publish it.
Really?
Yeah. And we couldn't figure out how to do it. So there was like some words.
I have no idea. Medium was censoring us?
Yeah, I mean,
already.
Yeah.
But there was like no, we tried to change the wording and it was still couldn't be published.
I'm so mad. Wow.
Yeah.
You should be happy. It's a good opportunity to.
But they didn't say word. They didn't say
Wow.
word.
It's a small forest
I
fire.
think that there were like Chris was
It was the word bounty, and then we tried to appeal, and there's a huge thing. It took like a week, and then we eventually gave up. We just gave up.
Yeah, so we pretty much created a guest and linked it
So
to.
we had a small Medium post about, or was it a Medium post?
No.
We put up a post about how we got censored by me, or something like that.
Yeah, so that was really strange, and Medium really like failed here. So
We've also been censored on GitHub, right? at one point. Coercion was trying to adjust some of the words that we use in that list, and GitHub got pretty mad.
No,
Okay.
I think he was doing that preemptively because he figured out there was an article on Hacker News.
Yeah, he was worried. I think wasn't he worried about like censorship on these things, or they were like
It's because
somebody?
there was some PC squads on GitHub that were using bots to make pull requests, removing stuff like master slave or that kind of
It
stuff.
was just like random words like black, you know, and that sort of thing.
So all joking, I think this is an interesting point, right? Because this GitHub thing and this Medium thing, like it's nothing, right? Like it's a small thing. It's very easy for us to fix it on, but it's a great example of sort of small forest fires kind of things. So in forests, you have this concept of like if you have small fires, then the forest actually gets more robust and stronger. Whereas if you don't have any fires, if you put down all forest fires, then if you have a fire, then it takes roots and the whole forest disappears, right? So this is a great example of that, where we have an opportunity to sort of react to these things by saying, okay, we're not going to use GitHub, we're not going to use Medium, these things, and make large systems stronger. So this is really a blessing in disguise. Like this is not a bad thing; it's really a good thing. And it would be better the more of these things that we see, I think, because they don't kill us at all. Which makes us stronger.
We're children finding the edges of the playpen.
Yeah, so that happened, but yeah, the bug bounty is running. So we so far received 4 valid submissions, but they were not really related to the app itself. So they were related to our domain DNS configuration. So people could send malicious emails and pretending that it's someone from the company, from the status.in. There were recently some, I didn't really follow up on this, but there was also some submissions about about open ports on some of our servers and ping-jacking vulnerability for some of our websites. They are like pretty minor things, but yeah, they got found. So some people actually like this bug bounty reached a couple of people, and they were actually started looking into our stuff, so that is good information. But yeah, the sad thing is that no one really, I mean, maybe they tried, but there was no successful submissions about any vulnerability in our app itself.
Why do you think that is? Like, did we not find the right people to hunt the bounties? Or?
I'm not exactly sure if we tracked how this bounty, like how many people the bounty program reached. So because we couldn't run it on Medium, so I guess that chop off some of our ways of measuring the.
We put it out there. We haven't put a ton of. We announced it at town hall. We did a couple of things, but we haven't like gone out and out launching it. Also, the numbers they're high, but like I mean it's between 2,000 and 50,000.
Oh, okay.
Dollars.
Okay.
50,000 for like the worst vulnerabilities, and so far our payouts have been, we've paid out I think $1,000 for each of them.
Yes.
At least 3 of them have been 1,000.
Yeah, but they were they were not related to that stuff. So I imagine that first of all, also what candidates that we reached so far through hiring. So when we had like a exercise for them after the initial talk, screening, and they're kind of, most voices are saying that it's just too much to dive into that. So one of our things is to try to analyze the app and try to point security calls, and people are like, it's too much. It's, I would need some month to dig into that. So that might be a complexity of the architecture stuff. So that's one thing, but
there are also these dedicated communities communities to penetration testing, all these things, and we haven't really pushed it to those. So it might be that if you are an excellent bug hunter, right, like you look in these forums and that's your view on the world, right? You don't read random Twitter or Medium things.
Yeah, but we have this role open. I know that I need to follow up with one person.
It's been hard to hire. It has been hard to find someone.
Yeah, that's true. And many of the applications from people, there are like, a lot of people comes from like the corporate environment, and they are like having a lot of walls of text in their CVs with some forward words, for character words, the abbreviations that very hard to figure out what it means.
A lot of the right people for this kind of stuff are actually on Twitter, right? Like, you know, and like they're very vocal about these things. And they build personal brands around themselves, or all that sort of stuff. And then like we don't intersect with them at all. You know, very, very frequently we touch them. And so that would be one of the reasons why we're not sourcing them directly.
Might make a little bit of sense right now since we're still changing the app, I believe. Don't bring them. Don't
No,
bring
yeah,
out
you
the
don't
other
wanna-
guns until
You don't want to.
until we actually have something.
You'd be embarrassed.
Like the guy who wrote one of the articles that you shared, like everything is broken or something. I think this guy would freak out.
That was a girl.
Ah, ooh, wrong assumption.
Her boyfriend committed suicide due to legal pressure. Name Swartz.
Orange
Swartz.
Yeah.
So that was his partner that wrote an article.
Yeah, so just to get back to that, this is also her point that we are kind of pushing for this audit, but yeah, it's a lot of things that we just mentioned that we need to fix. So yeah, on the one hand, it's really like when we're releasing this stuff, moving from beta to 1.0 and so on, it really makes sense to run a security audit. On the other hand, we know that we are gonna change a lot of things. So yeah, and just quick think about security and status, like what we have. So we have like the channel in Slack, and we have also this email alias address for all security related topics that we like put officially on blog posts and other pages that people can reach us through. So yeah, that's pretty much all. Yeah, that will be all. Cool, thanks.
So, are we hungry yet? Do we want to keep going? I think it would be nice in general just to get some air, because we don't want to fall asleep during the presentation. I don't know if we want to break up for lunch now.
I think
or
It's
maybe
only
just
open for
grab
1 hour,
coffee.
so
Yeah.
better early.
Yeah. Should we say that we get back here in like 45 minutes, something like that? Is that doable?
It's a pizza place 3 minutes walk from here.